rings and he danced for you. In his worn-out shoes, with silver hair and ragged shirt and baggy pants, he would do the old soft shoe. He would jump so high, then he'd lightly touch down. He told me of the time he worked with minstrel shows, traveling throughout the South. He spoke with tears of 15 years, how his dog and he, they would travel about. But his dog up and died. Oh, got up and died. And after 15 years he still breathed. He said, I mostly dance now in these honky-tonks for my drinks and tips. Most of the time I spend behind these county bars. You see, son, I drinks a bit. Then he shook his head. Oh, when he shook his head, I could swear I heard somebody say, please, Mr. Bojangles. Mr. Bojangles, Mr. Bojangles, come back and dance. Please dance and dance and dance. Mr. Bojangles, call him Mr. Bojangles. Mr. Bojangles, come back and dance. Please dance and dance and dance.
There you go, some news. I think Simon's going to be really disappointed. He wanted crying emojis in that chat, and it's happened again. They're out on the floor. Right, that one desperately wanted to be out. So who's up next? Stephanie Wrobel. Let me tell you about Stephanie Wrobel when I find her information. There it is. It's all going so well. Stephanie Wrobel was born and grew up in Chicago in the US. She was a voracious reader as a child, and a later fascination with language led to work as a copywriter. After a move to the UK in 2014, she set to work writing The Recovery of Rose Gold, which is out now. Stephanie now lives in London, where she writes full-time. So everybody, please give a huge round of applause to Stephanie Wrobel.
Hi, thank you so much for having me tonight. These readings have been wonderful, and I have a lot of books to pick up now, which is nice. As Vic mentioned, my book is The Recovery of Rose Gold, and it's a story about a mother and daughter named Patty and Rose Gold Watts. And it starts with Patty getting out of prison after serving 5 years for poisoning her daughter. And so she gets out, she has nowhere to go, and she begs her now adult daughter, Rose Gold, to take her in. And to the shock of all of her neighbors, Rose Gold says yes. And the question is why? So the book is written from both of their points of view, Patty's and Rose Gold's, and it's in two timelines. Patty's is the present, which is from the time she gets out of prison. And then Rose Gold's is 5 years earlier and takes place while Patty's away. So I thought I would read a couple pages of each character. So I'll do a few pages from chapter 1 and then a few pages from chapter 2. So here we go. Chapter 1, Patty, day of release. My daughter didn't have to testify against me. She chose to. It's Rose Gold's fault I went to prison, but she's not the only one to blame. If we're pointing fingers, mine are aimed at the prosecutor and his overactive imagination, the gullible jury, and the bloodthirsty reporters. They all clamored for justice. What they wanted was a story. Get out your popcorn because boy did they write one. Once upon a time, they said, a wicked mother gave birth to a daughter. The daughter appeared to be very sick and had all sorts of things wrong with her. She had a feeding tube, her hair fell out in clumps, and she was so weak she needed a wheelchair to get around. For 18 years, no doctor could figure out what was wrong with her. Then along came 2 police officers to save the daughter. Lo and behold, the girl was perfectly healthy. The evil mother was the sick one. The prosecutor told everyone the mother had been poisoning her daughter for years. It was the mother's fault the girl couldn't stop vomiting, that she suffered from malnutrition. Aggravated child abuse, he called it. The mother had to be punished. After she was arrested, the press swooped in like vultures, eager to capitalize on a family being ripped apart. Their headlines screamed for the blood of poisonous Patty, a 50-something master of manipulation. All the mother's friends fell for the lies. High horses were marched all over the land. Every lawyer, cop, and neighbor was sure they were the girl's savior. They put the mother in prison and threw away the key. Justice was served, and most of them lived happily ever after. The end. But where were the lawyers while the mother was scrubbing the girl's vomit out of the carpet for the 1,000th time? Where were the cops while the mother pored over medical textbooks every night? Where were the neighbors when the little girl cried out for her mother before sunrise? Riddle me this. If I spent almost 2 decades abusing my daughter, why did she offer to pick me up today? Connolly approaches my cell at noon sharp as promised. You ready, Watts? I scramble off my Pop-Tart of a bed and pull my scratchy khaki uniform taut. Yes, sir. I have become a woman who chirps. The pot-bellied warden pulls out a large ring of keys and whistles as he slides open my door. I am Connolly's favorite inmate. I pause at my cellie's bed, not wanting to make a scene, but Alicia is already sitting against the wall, hugging her knees. She raises her eyes to mine and bursts into tears, looking much younger than 20. Shh, shh. I bend down and wrap the girl in my arms. I try to sneak a peek at her bandaged wrists, but she catches me. Keep applying the ointment and changing those dressings. No infections, I say, wiggling my eyebrows at her. Alicia smiles, tears staining her face. She hiccups. Yes, Nurse Watts. I try not to preen. I was a certified nursing assistant for 12 years. Good girl. Diaz is going to walk the track with you today. 30 minutes. Doctor's orders. I smile back, petting Alicia's hair. Her hiccups have stopped. You'll write me? I nod. And you can call me whenever. Squeezing her hand, I stand again and head toward Connolly, who has been waiting patiently. I pause at the threshold and look back at Alicia, making a mental note to send her a letter when I get home. 1 hour at a time. Alicia waves shyly. Good luck out there. Connolly and I walk toward intake and release. My fellow inmates call out their farewells. Keep in touch, you hear? We'll miss you, Mama. Stay out of trouble, Skeeto. Short for mosquito, a nickname given as an insult but taken as a compliment. Mosquitoes never give up. Okay, now we're going to move on to chapter 2, which is Rose Gold, 5 years earlier, November 2012. Sometimes I still couldn't believe I was allowed to read whatever I wanted. I rubbed the glossy magazine photos. A flawless couple held hands on a beach. A teenage boy with shaggy hair ducked into a waiting car. A radiant mother cradled her daughter as she walked the streets of New York. All of these people were famous. I knew the mother was a musician named Beyonce, but I didn't recognize the others. I was sure most 18-year-olds would. Rose Gold? I started. My manager, Scott, stood in front of me. We're about to open, he said. Can you put the magazine away? I nodded. Scott kept walking. Should I have apologized? Was he mad at me or just doing his job? Could I get written up for this? I was supposed to respect authority. I was also supposed to outsmart them. Mom always had. I gazed at the copy of Chit Chat in my hands. I had been searching the tabloid for mentions of her. During her trial, they had written 3 stories about us. Now, on her first day in prison, they had nothing to say. Neither did the national newspapers. Mom's imprisonment was nothing but a splashy feature in our local paper, the Dedwick Daily. I put the magazine back on the rack. Scott began clapping while he walked the store floor, yelling, "A smile is part of your uniform, people." I glanced at Arnie on register 2. He rolled his eyes. Had I annoyed him? What if he never talked to me again? What if he told all our coworkers I was a weirdo? I looked away. The security guard unlocked Gadget World's doors. No one was waiting outside. Sunday mornings were quiet. I flipped on my register's light. The big yellow 5 didn't illuminate. Mom always said a light bulb out meant something bad was coming. The tremblies in my stomach tightened. For the past year, I had dreaded any big day of her trial, opening arguments, my testimony, the verdict, sentencing. But the reporters didn't care that poisonous Patty was behind bars. No one but me had remembered it was her first day in prison. She'd still be free if I hadn't gotten on that witness stand. I hadn't talked to her since the arrest. I tried to picture my mother, 5'5" and stocky in an orange jumpsuit. What if the guards hurt her? What if she made the wrong inmate mad? What if she got sick from the food? I knew I was supposed to be happy about these possibilities. I knew I was supposed to hate Mom because people were always asking me if I did. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, and thank you for joining us. That was great. I can't wait to read it. Okay, so folks, just while I remember, don't forget you can nominate Quote of the Week. We usually have a poll going on Twitter after VNAB's finished. Someone has nominated High Horses Were Marched All Over the Land by Stephanie there. So at the moment, she is the winner because she has no competition. But if you want to pop it in the chat, please feel free. And don't forget there's a Q&A if you want to ask any questions. So who's next? It is MJ Arlidge.
Hello.
I'm just going to find your information, Matt. I'll not be a second. It was all going so well and it has just fallen apart. Do you want to give your own introduction, Matt?
Well, I will just say hello to everyone and thank you for all the lovely readings and happy birthday to Lawrence, and also to apologise for the strange lady behind me. Halfway through proceedings, my 10-year-old son decided that a blank wall was far too boring, so he added this this cardboard cutout behind me. It's a full cardboard cutout of a semi-naked lady with a blindfold on, which was used to promote the Italian version of my first novel. It has absolutely nothing to do with the contents of the novel, but the Italians, you know, they go their own way with their cover. So that was that. Anyway, I'm going to read to you today the first chapter from All Fall Down, which has literally just come out a week ago. It's the 9th book in the Helen Grace series, and this is chapter 1, short and sweet for you. Justin Lanning stared out of the window, his eyes fixed upon the horizon. The sun, which had flooded his office all day, was now starting to descend, its golden glare stealing across the water. There was something majestic, even triumphant about its progress, the long arms of light seeming to claim the lapping water, the bobbing boats, even the marina itself. It was a sight Justin had witnessed many times, but it still had the power to affect him. Awesome, beautiful, it was also soothing, a moment of relief after what had been a very trying day. Turning away from the floor-to-ceiling glass, Justin glanced at his watch, 17:58, then marched back to his desk. He was the sole occupant of this vast, well-appointed office, a fact that gave him much pleasure. It was opulent, indulgent, powerful, but it was also a glorious secret. From the outside, Endeavour House looked no different to any of the other office blocks in Ocean Village. The foyer was unexceptional, offering no clue as to the bespoke offices on the top 2 floors, offices that were designed to dazzle. The expensive Italian furniture, the modern art installations, and yes, the view, everything had been carefully calibrated to pronounce affluence, professionalism, and success. Few were allowed in, but those that were left reassured and inspired after a tantalizing glimpse of Redstone Solutions. Switching off his computer, Justin picked up his phone and crossed to the lift. However demanding or unpredictable his day was, he prided himself in leaving on time. The efficiency of it appealed to him, in by 6, out by 6, and it was also useful in regulating his mood. Whatever the business of the day, if he could leave on time, then assuredly everything was under control. The lift doors slid open and Justin stepped inside, punching the button for the basement. If he left now, he could be home by 6:30, allowing him plenty of time for a workout before Adam returned. Adam. Just the thought of him conjured up a bewildering array of emotions, anger, disappointment, lust, and much more besides. Things have been so difficult recently, so complicated, that home was no longer the sanctuary it should have been. Their relationship needed to be carefully managed in a calm frame of mind, hence the importance of a relaxing workout beforehand. The doors kissed shut and the lift began to descend. The floors flicked by 10, 9, 8, 7. Justin found himself humming a cheerful tune, celebrating the fact that the working day was finally done. 6, 5, 4. Justin was losing himself in a pleasant reverie, his cares slowly melting away. Then suddenly, and without warning, the lift bucked, screeching to a shuddering halt, throwing him backwards. Justin crashed into the mirrored wall, cracking his head against the glass, exhaling an expletive as the wind was punched from him. A strange silence now filled the metal box, the pleasing hum of progress replaced by lifeless inertia. Stunned, Justin stumbled forward, stabbing the button for the basement once, twice, 3 times. Nothing happened, and even as he continued to jab away, he became aware of something else. The lights had gone out too. It was as if the whole contraption had suddenly just died. Gathering himself, he tried the buttons for the other floors before giving up, hitting the alarm bell in angry resignation. Somewhere in the distance, a dull ringing sounded, but this gave him little comfort. It would take the office manager an age to summon the lift engineers, and longer still for them to free him, as he appeared to be stuck between floors. Would they be able to get the lift working again, or would they have to haul him up the lift shaft like a sack of potatoes? Cursing, he kicked the doors, his plan for the evening disintegrating. What the hell had happened for him to be left here, dangling like a broken puppet? What was going on? He felt it before he heard it, his new Samsung vibrating in his pocket before letting out its familiar trill. Thank God. Someone was aware of his plight. There was no question in his mind that this call was connected to his emergency. Tugging out the phone, he was surprised by the caller ID. It wasn't Adam or the office, the number withheld, but he answered it anyway. What did it matter who it was, so long as they could liberate him from this tin can? Hello? He was met by silence. This is Justin Lanning. Can you hear me? His voice filled the lift, but there was no response. He was convinced the connection was fine. He could hear something humming at the other end. So why wasn't the caller responding? I'm stuck between floors 4 and 3, so if you can... Now something made him stop. An intake of breath at the other end, as if the caller was about to speak. Justin wanted to carry on to explain his predicament, but suddenly he felt powerless to continue, as if something or someone was commanding him to be quiet. And now, finally, the caller did speak, a soft male voice whispering, "You have 1 hour to live." That's the end of the first chapter.
Thank you so much for that, Matt. That was great. I have got it on my TBR, but I haven't quite got there yet, but it's definitely been elevated after that reading. So thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Pleasure.
Okay, we have 2 more readings during this part of the evening. Again, if you're talking about us on social media, please do use that hashtag. Right, and it is Margaret Murphy. Margaret Murphy writes internationally acclaimed psychological thrillers under her own name and forensic thrillers as Ashley Dyer and A.D. Garrett. She is the founder of Murder Squad, a past chair of the Crime Writers Association, a CWA short story Dagger, Red Herring, and HRF Keating Award winner, woo, and has also been shortlisted for the First Blood Critics Award and Dagger in the Library. So everybody, huge round of applause for the lovely Margaret Murphy.
Thank you very much. I think I've unmuted myself now. Thanks very much, Vic. And I'd like to say a few things about my checkered past. I have written 9 psychological novels as Margaret Murphy, but I've also written 5 forensic thrillers under 2 different pseudonyms. But today I'm going to be reading from one of the Margaret Murphy titles. I recently signed up with Joffy Books, and they are republishing the 9 novels that have previously been published, but they will also be publishing 2 brand new novels. And the first of those will be out in July. Unfortunately, it's not available for pre-order. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read from Weaving Shadows, which is one of the previous titles, and that has been re-released, and it is on special offer at the moment. So I'm going to read from that. And just to give you a little bit of background, this is the second in a duology, and it's based in Chester. and it's based around a barrister called Clara Pascal. In the previous novel, she went through a terrible trauma, which means that she's so kind of damaged by it that she can't face doing criminal law anymore. And that's where her real strengths lie. So she's relying on a friend who hands her a little bit of family law to do from time to time, but she's floundering, her marriage is floundering, her child hates her, and she's not doing very well. So it's a real surprise when she is drawn into representing a man who's not only a criminal, but has been accused of a really violent murder. Now, I'm not going to read the murder scene, but I am going to read the aftermath. So if you're particularly squeamish, it's nothing terrible in it, but if you are very squeamish, you might want to turn away for a few moments. By 6 a.m., the thin mist hugging the ground in pockets was all but gone. A dew pearled the neatly trimmed squares of lawn, marking the boundaries between private property and public footpath. But the south-facing houses in Lea Hurst Street were already warming in the sun. A wood pigeon crooned mournfully across the empty roadway, and the air, still pungent with the spicy sweet scent of honeysuckle, blurred the margins of night and day. Mark Tidswell's milk float wheezed down the street, stopping every 20 yards. He was a neat, wiry man, and he worked fast. Number 29 was up early. The front door was open and the milk bottles gleamed on the step. Nice-looking bint, that one. He engaged in a mildly erotic fantasy as he bent to pick up the sun-warmed empties and replaced them with 1 pint of milk and 1 of orange. He wasn't sure what made him turn back. Something he'd seen, but which didn't register on a conscious level. What he told his wife, but not the lads back at the dairy, was that the hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and he felt a dark presence at his back. When he looked again at the white UPVC doorframe, he saw blood. A wide track of it, as if something very wet with it had brushed past, leaving a slick 10 centimetres wide. There was blood on the door handle too, like someone had tried to pull the door shut on the way out. He looked down and saw that the doormat was rucked and a corner caught at the bottom of the frame, preventing the door from closing. Tidswell eased the empty bottles back onto the doorstep, wincing at the faint clink of glass on glass. He dipped inside his uniform jacket, took his mobile phone from his shirt pocket, and punched 999. His finger hovered over the call button as he pushed the door open, taking care to avoid the smears of blood. His heart was hammering. He felt both foolish and terrified. After all, what did he know? She might have cut herself, pruning the roses, or it might not be blood at all. He might just open the porch door and see her padding down in nightie, munching a piece of toast. The notion no longer had any erotic allure. He was about to step inside when he realised that he had nothing heavier than his mobile phone to heave at an attacker, and he bent to pick up a full bottle of milk. The hall was empty and still, almost as if the house held its breath. "Hello?" he called, ready to back out fast if anyone replied. He took a couple more steps and called again. "Hello?" He couldn't remember her name. Number 29, a pint a day and orange juice on Wednesdays and Saturdays. He could remember that, but not her name. There was more blood on the door of the front room. On the broad wedge of carpet visible through the open door, a shoe print, large, man-size, and a smell, like a butcher's slab. His breathing grew shallower, more rapid. "Press call and wait for the cops, Mark," he told himself, but pride made him go on. He would feel a prize prat if they called them out and Mrs. 29 came trolling downstairs wanting to know what the hell he was doing in her hallway and why the police were clumping up their path. So he eased the door open, calling again, glad that the lads couldn't hear that tentative, poncy, "Hello." She lay on her back, her feet towards him. The milk bottle slipped through his fingers and bounced on the carpet. The pressure lifted the edge of the foil cap and it leaked silently on the floor, turning pink as it mingled with a patch of blood. Her face was covered with a cushion taken from the sofa near the window, but there was no doubt as to how she died. None at all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Margaret. And thank you for joining us this evening. Okay, one more reader during this part of the evening. So we have Jenny Blackhurst. Jenny Blackhurst is the author of 5 psychological thrillers. Her debut, How I Lost You, received a Silver Nielsen Award and sold over 350,000 copies. Woo! She lives in Shropshire with her husband, 2 sons, and their dog Woody. Jenny is currently working on her 6th psychological thriller whilst locked in with a house full of smelly boys. So everybody give some love to Jenny Blackhurst.
Hello. Hi, thanks for having me. Tonight I'm going to read from The Night She Died, which, oh, you can't see because I put a background in. So I should explain why you can't see, I suppose, first. This behind me is my office, but the signal for the Wi-Fi in my office is absolutely terrible at the moment. So actually I'm not in my office, I'm just virtually in here, which means that I keep disappearing every now and then. Sorry if that's off-putting. So this is my 4th book, The Night She Died, and I will try and sneak the... There we go. Prologue. She stands on the edge of the cliff, long blonde hair fluttering behind her in the light breeze. Her feet under her floor-length gown are bare and grubby, and the grass beneath them is damp, but she doesn't feel the cold. Gazing out across the dark, still water, she's at peace. Evelyn doesn't need to look down to know that the sea laps against jagged rocks at the foot of the cliff. She isn't afraid of them. She's stood before this sea many times before. The waves know her name. They know her story. She lifts a hand to remove the veil from her face. The diamond tiara, which once belonged to her mother, and her mother before that, falls to the floor without a sound. There's no noise up here, none except the whispering of the sea and that of her own breathing, slow and gentle. 2 figures are watching from the twilight shadows across the cliffs. They're further away than she would have liked, but the night is clear enough for them to make out her tall, supple form, her fitted wedding gown. Close enough to identify her to her husband, too far to react when they realise her intentions. For now, for the next few seconds, she is a newlywed, taking time away from the intensity of her wedding day, escaping the music and the wine, the constant flow of congratulatory jokes about married life. They are lovers, enjoying their balmy evening stroll, imagining that one day their friends will gather to hear their vows, offer their congratulations to the bride, commiserations to the groom. As the woman lets go of her veil and watches it flutter towards the cliff edge, she steps forward, confident and unhesitant, and hurls herself into the darkness. A few moments ago, they were just lovers. Now, they are witnesses. Chapter 1, Rebecca, the night of the wedding. The remaining wedding guests gather on the lawn, sobered by shock, stunned into silence by their grief. A woman, Evelyn's great-aunt Beth, sobs quietly into a handkerchief handed to her by her husband, a slip of a man, weak-chested and weak-willed. Only 3 hours ago, he had frowned and nodded in all the right places when Beth had complained about everything from the bohemian ceremony, music, decor, and the downright hippie friends Evelyn had made herself. How her late niece, Evelyn's mother, would be turning in her still fresh grave to see her friends and family associating with such classlessness. Now, silence prevails as it seems her daughter will be joining her. My heart thuds as I stand outside the hotel door, listening to muted voices interspersed with furious outbursts. Richard. I brace myself to go in, but falter as Richard begins to shout again, screaming that he should be out searching, that his wife would not have done this to him. This is my cue. I know that as Evie's best friend and maid of honour, I have my part to play. But suddenly, I don't want to open that door. I don't want to see the look on Richard's face or watch his heart breaking. Footsteps the other side of the door shock me into action, and I slam my fist against it. Richard! It opens almost immediately, and behind it stands one of the police officers I'd seen lead Richard away 20 minutes before. The longest 20 minutes of my life. I need to speak to Richard. I'm sorry, he begins, but a firm voice from inside cuts him off. Let her in, Richard says, and the sigh of resignation tells me what I need to know. She's Evie's best friend. She deserves to hear this. The police officer steps to one side and I barrel past him into the small hotel room with its whitewashed walls and near-perfect view of the cliffs. The same cliffs Richard Bradley's wife has just thrown herself from. Richard! I hurl myself at him, grasping his forearms. Where's Evie? They're saying downstairs that she jumped off the cliff, but that's crazy. Where is she? When he doesn't speak, I shake him, but he still can't say the words. One of the police officers, the woman, looks as though she wants to cry as she steps forward and places a hand on my arm and gently but firmly guides me away. My name is Detective Michelle Green. This is Detective Thomas. First name Michelle's voice is slow and kind. Detective Thomas just stands there looking brooding. He's tall and broad, olive skin and dark hair. He looks like a TV cop, but so far it's a non-speaking part. Every now and then he gives me an appraising look, one that makes me feel guilty, like I'm doing something wrong by being here. He's just watching, waiting. What for? We've had reports of a woman fitting Evelyn's description, seen entering the water around 40 minutes ago. Have you seen Mrs. Bradley in the last hour? I picture my best friend the last time I saw her, 45 minutes ago. She's walking towards the edge of the marquee when she turns back. She seeks me out, and as our eyes meet, she gives me a reassuring smile. She doesn't look afraid, as I am. She is unflinching and unhesitant. She turns away and disappears into the darkness, and for a split second, I want to run after her, grab her and not let go. But my feet don't move and the moment is gone. She is gone. No, I say. I haven't seen her. I've sobbed until my eyes are raw and tight, real tears that take me by surprise. That's it then, a voice in my mind says. She's gone. You're on your own. And the thought's almost too much to bear. Richard is still talking to the police, and I get the impression they're keeping him here so he won't go to the cliff top, so he won't do anything stupid. I'm staring out of the window at where torches are panning the area and where the white lights of the search and rescue helicopter light up the sky. They have a helicopter, I say, and my voice sounds as though it belongs to someone else. I wish it did. Then those lights would be seeking out someone else's best friend in the darkness. Which is only just arriving. It's been nearly a fucking hour, Richard blasts. He walks to the window, then immediately back, chewing at the loose skin on his top lip, an annoying habit that pops up when he's anxious. She'll be freezing. And why are they concentrating on below the cliffs? She could have swum halfway back to London by now. Because they aren't looking for a woman swimming. I don't want to say the words, and neither do the police. Richard has come to the obvious conclusion himself, that tonight, his wife, my best friend, jumped into the sea to die. And I'm the only person who knows why. That's me done. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Right. Gianne has a question for you, actually, Jenny. She's wondering about your decision to write in first person as opposed to third. How did you come to that conclusion and make that decision?
As with most of my books, actually, I try it a few ways and find which feels, so not all of my books are written in first person and they're not all written in third. I'll try a scene and see how it feels, and a lot of the time I feel that in first person I find the character a lot easier to get into, and I find the character a lot easier to empathize with. And as you find out about the character I've just been reading, whose first person I'm reading from, point of view I'm reading from, she's not all she appears to be, and so that might mean that she would be quite hard to empathize with as a writer. And by sort of putting myself in her place, it meant that I could empathize with her much more then.
Great, thank you, and thank you for joining us tonight. Right, okay, so we are going to have another break. I think this one is a bit more kind of traditional in terms of previous VNATB breaks. We shall be back in about, I think, 5 minutes. Get your pieces of paper, get yourselves another drink, drop us an email if you'd like to win a free book or reserve a t-shirt, and we will see you very soon.
Never know how much I love you. You'll never know how much I care. But when you put your arms around me, I get a fever that's so hard to bear. You give me fever when you kiss me, fever when you hold me tight, fever in the morning, fever all through the night. Sun lights up the daytime, moon lights up the night. I light up when you call my name, and I know you're gonna treat me right. You give me fever when you kiss me, fever when you hold me tight, fever in the morning, fever all through the night. Everybody got the fever, that is something we all know. Fever isn't such a new thing, fever started long ago. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Romeo loved Juliet, Juliet, she felt the same. When he put his arms around her, he said, Julie, baby, you're my flame. You give me fever when we kiss, fever with thy flaming youth. Fever, I'm a fire. Fever, yeah, I burn forsooth. Captain Smith and Pocahontas, they had a very mad affair. When her daddy tried to kill him, she said, Daddy, baby, don't you dare. He gives me fever with his kisses, fever when he holds me tight. Fever, I'm his missus. Daddy, won't you treat him right? My story, here's the point that I have made. Chicks were born to give you fever, be it Fahrenheit or centigrade, they give you fever with their kisses. Fever, yeah, I live and learn. Fever, I'm on fire, what a lovely way to burn. What a lovely way to burn. What a lovely way to burn. What a lovely way to burn.
How did you get on? So the music during both breaks tonight is from Newcastle's very own Jason Isaacs. Apparently he was the winner of the Alan Titchmarsh Show's Britain's Best Crooner competition, and I can see why. I was really loving that, I've got to say. So up next is Laura Shepherd Robinson. Laura Shepherd Robinson worked in politics for nearly 20 years before re-entering normal life to complete an MA in creative writing at City University. Blood and Sugar, her first novel, won the Historical Writers Association debut crown, woo, was a Waterstones Thriller of the Month, woo, and a Guardian and Telegraph Novel of the Year. Wow. Laura's next novel is due out in 2021. So everybody, huge round of applause for Laura Shepherd Robinson.
Hi, is that, you can hear me? Yes, good. So I'm slightly sad because tomorrow would have been the publication day for my second novel, Daughters of Night. But because of the current situation, it has been, as you say, put off until January. And so, but even so, I was originally going to read from Daughters of Night, and I've never read from it before. So I decided to read from it anyway, even though it's not out until January. So I hope you will enjoy. I'm going to start from the beginning, from chapter 1. In the wrong hands, a secret is a weapon. Caroline Caution was alive to the danger, to the vulnerability of her position. She had thought of little else since last night's disaster. Yet now that the truth was known, her secret guessed, the blade honed sharp, what choice did she have left except to believe? A last roll of the dice, nothing ventured, nothing gained. These banalities spurred her on. God grant me courage. Taking a ginger comfit from her enamelled pillbox, Carrie slipped it into her mouth, her nausea rising. Muslin, lace and brocade hemmed her in on every side, jewelled buttons flashing on embroidered waistcoats, pastel shades of periwig and kid glove, silver buckles glinting in the light of 1,000 beeswax candles that filled the domed roof of the rotunda with their honeyed scent. It was the opening night of Jacobus Agnetti's exhibition of classical scenes, and half of London society had turned out for the wretched man. Distractedly, she greeted people she knew, allies of her husband in the House of Commons, clients of the Craven Bank, rival beauties, solicitous matrons, admiring gentlemen. Their laughter was shrill, pink faces merged in a smear of complacency. They smile to bare their teeth before they rip you apart. A young baronet was explaining some technical aspect of the paintings to her, though she doubted he'd ever held a brush in his life. Gazing around the rotunda, the canvases encircled her in one endless bloody spectacle. Men in helmets killing one another, killing monsters, killing women, the rape of Lucretia, Medea slaughtering her infant children. It's how history remembers the lady, she thought, by our death or our dishonour or our sins. Her skin was hot as Hades. Her fears clamoured at her like a Greek chorus. She glanced at the clock on the rotunda wall. It was time. Outside, the music had picked up tempo as night had fallen. Before Caro stretched a fantasy land, 10,000 lights adorning the trees and the supper boxes and the Chinese pavilion. The Vauxhall pleasure gardens were busy even for a warm August night. Ladies and gentlemen perambulating the lime walks under the stars. Drawing the hood of her sable cloak up over her piled hair, Caro headed for one of the garden's perimeter paths, where her peacock blue satin and lack of servant would attract less attention. The air was rich with the smells of Vauxhall, heady perfumes of flowers, hot pies, gunpowder. The fireworks startled like pistol shots, the revellers' faces flashing green and red and gold. A party of young bucks in carnival masks were swaggering around by a statue of Venus. They tried to waylay her with wine, but she hurried on. The path grew darker as she progressed deeper into the gardens. Couples giggled in the shadows, young gentlemen sweet-talking shop girls into parting with their dubious virtue, clerks and apprentices fallen prey to Vauxhall's whores. Caro herself was not unfamiliar with this part of the gardens. God might see everything, but husbands didn't, especially when they were sojourned in France neglecting their wife and child. Nevertheless, her pulse was erratic. Every danger was heightened now, and anyone who saw her down here would presume she was meeting a lover. Curls of river fog drifted towards her. The fireworks boomed like a salvo of cannon. On either side, the trees pressed in, the path deserted. Caro turned into the dark walk that ran alongside the eastern wall of the gardens, nearly colliding with a man coming the other way. She cried out in horror, drawing back. Two bulging eyes loomed at her over a long, grotesque beak, her broad-brimmed hat casting the rest of the face into shadow. Caro backed up against the trees, half paralysed with terror, but the man in the mask brushed past her without a word. Collecting herself, a little shaken by the incident, she pressed on. Abutting the garden's wall were the bowers, a dozen or more little chambers carved into the greenery, invisible from the path. Soft laughter drifted on the breeze, and a voice murmured faint endearments. People hung hats or tied handkerchiefs to the lamps outside each bower, and Caro looked for their agreed signal, an ostrich feather. Spotting it tied to a lamp up ahead, she glanced around herself. Danger upon danger, but she'd come too far to turn back now. Hurrying into the bower, she stopped, drawing up short. A lantern, a stone bench, willows stirring in the breeze. These were the things she expected to see. Not a woman lying on the ground, her body curled like a question mark, the stomacher of her pink gown stained a shocking dark red. One of her gloved hands clawed at a wound in her throat. The other lay limp next to a blood-stained document on the grass. Caro stared, confused, half expecting the woman to rise and laugh at the joke. It was as if she'd stepped into one of Jacobus Agnetti's paintings. The woman groaned, a raw, inhuman sound, and more details lodged in Caro's mind. Blood in the woman's chestnut hair, one slipper on, one slipper off, her bone-white face at once alien and familiar. Oh Lord, oh no, oh Lucia. Still she stared, at Lucia's contorted mouth, at the blood, so much blood. Don't just stand there, you have to help her, move. Dropping to her knees, the soil wet with blood beneath them, she pulled off her cloak. More blood pumped from several deep, dark wounds in Lucia's stomach. Caro tried to staunch the flow, but her cloak was soon heavy and sodden in her hands. Who did this to you? She cried helplessly. Who did this? Lucia's fingers found her own. She gazed at Caro as if from a distance. Her lips parted, her words a whisper. He knows. There you go. That was the first chapter of The Daughters of Night.
And is that the first reading you've done?
Of this book, yes.
Fabulous, thank you. Alex Hawley would like to know, going back to Blood and Sugar, what made you choose the theme for that book?
So Blood and Sugar is a novel about the very beginnings of the anti-slavery movement in Britain. I suppose the thing that made me choose that subject was because I feel it's a part of our history that, ironically, until quite recently, we haven't really properly addressed or acknowledged or got to grips with. And, you know, although I was taught about it in school, it was taught very much through the prism of William Wilberforce. And it was like, we were the first nation to abolish slavery. And it's, you know, it was almost like it was something to be celebrated, that we were so enlightened, and kind of skipped over the 300 years before that when we were profiting from the slave trade. And so I wanted to write a novel about it. And because I love crime fiction, I wanted to write a sort of crime thriller that it was based on that subject.
Brilliant, thank you so much, and thank you for sharing the first reading of your next novel with us. It's been great having you here, Laura.
Pleasure, thank you.
I mean, now that she's been on, I will just tell you, as soon as I joined the room earlier, I said, oh, Laura, you've got something sparkly drink in your hand, and she did say, well, it is more at the bar, so we do have quite the reputation. Our penultimate reader tonight is Mark Leggatt. Mark Leggatt is an author of 3 books with 2 on the go. He is also a developmental editor, mentor, and literary consultant. He's also one quarter of 4 blokes in search of a plot who toured live before what Mark calls the plague. They are now online though, so you can still track them down. Mark says, and I think some members of our audience tonight might disagree, Mark says he's the most interesting one by far of 4 blokes in search of a plot. Mr. Broadfoot, it's open for a rebuttal there. They will be back for more laughs and terrible crime stories soon and promise to be older, funnier and fatter. So with that in mind, please, everyone, welcome Mark Leggatt.
Thanks very much, everyone. I'm going to read a short extract, the prologue, in fact, to get it up there, from a work in progress. It's a psychological thriller called Penitent. Just for a bit of context, Penitent is about a chap called Hector Lawless, who's a really nice guy with a strong moral compass, but he has severe OCD and anxiety amongst other mental health issues, and he's probably also on the autistic spectrum. He's solitary but not lonely, and when his emotional support mechanisms and morality are undermined and then stripped away, he loses everything that's held his life together and he becomes a very different man. The theme of the book for me is redemption, but at great cost. It is, it's a wee bit of Jekyll and Hyde for the 21st century. Friday, 13th of December. I saw my future and it terrified me. The blood in my head pumped so hard it shook my vision. In the next few minutes, I would live or die. I closed the attic skylight, and in the amber glow from the street, the dust settled around me, drifting into dark corners, sticking to my sweat-streaked face and hands. It's not as if I hadn't planned it. I stood wide-legged on the rafters and stared out into the blue-black northern sky. The grubby winter sun had died around 3 p.m, and the thin grey dusk that remained soon disappeared under the weight of winter darkness. I closed my eyes and tried to listen above the sound of my blood and ragged breath for any sirens or the thud of boots, and thought back to that steel grey November day when the cold cracked the stone around me and I had engineered my own death. If it worked, then this night might be my last, and the end of Hector Lawless. I turned my head to the gable and stepped onto another rafter, then rested my fingertips against the stone to steady myself. A handprint would be a giveaway. I looked down to the narrow plank of wood that led to my cell. This night, I might pass into oblivion, unrecorded and unmourned. I would be a ghost, either forever tormented or tormenting. I lifted a short plank to the side and squeezed through the gap and stepped down onto the ladder until only my head was in darkness. I pulled the plank over my head, then turned the locks either side to hold it in place. I stood at the foot of the ladder. The 4 windowless walls seemed closer than ever, but now they were my comfort. I stepped sideways past the old army cot and stood in the middle of the room and began to pull off my clothes. My fingertips and nails were white from the constant thin rain and the North Sea. I stood naked, my arms outstretched, and my fingertips brushed both walls of the room. My bed was made, as it should be. My small desk was clean, apart from a laptop and monitors. The shelves that I had built, that took up half the wall space and stretched to the roof, were all empty. Then I heard them coming. Through the wall, I heard the diesel engines and van doors. I dropped my arms to the side. The engines did not roar and the doors did not slam. I closed my eyes and let my head fall back. They pressed all the buzzers to the flats. I rubbed my face on my cold hands and reached over and turned on the monitor. The picture was split into 4 cameras, and one I saw the street outside. I had never seen so many people in the street before, although there were probably only 10 in total. A small huddle of residents who had never heard of me before this day, who had never bid me good morning. Now their faces were screwed tight with disgust. They began to back away when a TV van appeared. After all, this was the new town. It would not do to be seen on the street like commoners. Some retreated to doorways. Others peeked from behind lace curtains. I couldn't hear them, but I knew they wanted to see me pull down the steps to the street, so that for one fleeting moment they could feel the warm manifestation of their righteous anger and cling to the hope that they were justified in this callous world, this immoral black void filling them with worth and purpose until it faded, and they needed another fix of outrage on whatever media gave them their cold, vicious comfort. In another camera, the attic was lit in pale grey by infrared light. My footsteps were gone. I typed the command to kill the light. In the third camera, one of my neighbours opened the front door to the police. They moved quickly, but I could hear no hard boots on the stairs, just a creak of wood under big men. They stood in front of my door, but did not knock. One policeman hefted a thick black cylinder, and I heard the crash when the door broke. On the fourth screen, a man entered my sitting room. I know him now. DCI Go Feather, Special Branch. Through the soles of my feet, I felt the old floorboards sag as he stepped forward. He looked around for a moment and then walked to the far wall. He stopped, facing a bookcase. I stared at the wall above the screen. He was 3 feet away. And back to the studio. Thanks, Vic.
Thank you so much for that, Mark. Okay, folks, as always, we have one name left in the hat, just to prove there's no skullduggery going on. Okay, it is, surprise, surprise, Liz Nugent. Liz Nugent has released 4 books, all of which have reached the #1 spot in the bestsellers list. Woo! They're called Unravelling Oliver, Lying in Wait, Skin Deep, and Our Little Cruelties. Our Little Cruelties was released 2 days before bookshops shut in the lockdown, but has managed to stay in the top 2 in Ireland in the 3 months since, holding the #1 spot for 7 weeks so far. Woo! Liz was awarded Irish Woman of the Year in Literature in 2018, and her first 3 novels have all been optioned for the screen. Woo! And finally, her books have been translated into 15 languages. And if I'm not mistaken, Liz, a certain Ms. Keys is a big fan of yours. Is that right?
Yeah, well, Marion is a friend and a neighbour. So, yeah, she's exceptionally kind to me.
Oh, that's
yeah.
So our final reader of tonight is the lovely Liz Nugent.
I'm going to read from Our Little Cruelties, the latest novel. And I'm just going to read, this part is narrated by Luke. He's 27 years old and the year is 1997. We don't sit around in pajamas all day, weaving wicker baskets. That's about the only stereotype that doesn't ring true. The rest is pretty accurate. The thrice daily medicine cart that keeps us from harming ourselves and each other. The catatonia of some patients, the extreme hostility of others, the group sessions and the twice weekly one-to-ones with your designated psychiatrist. I wasn't in a locked ward and I had not been committed, but that doesn't mean I wanted to stay. I was simply too scared to leave. The record company were paying for this month-long stint, but they had said that this was my last chance. The cancelled gigs and my erratic behaviour were untenable, apparently. And my old friend and manager, Sean, had made it clear that if the next UK tour did not go well, he would be finished with me. I could hardly blame him. The meltdowns, manic episodes, psychotic highs, and deepest lows had been a severe mental strain on everyone. There were several musicians who now refused to work with me. Tour managers had come and gone. I barely knew the names of half the people who shared the stage with me, and I needed a break. That's how I saw these residencies, a rest for my body and my mind. I didn't understand how other people could get along without them. Oh, there's another stereotypical thing that isn't true. We don't recline on sofas during a consultation. It's usually a comfortable armchair, and there are loads of boxes of tissues within reaching distance in cases of crying. I've done a lot of crying. So, Luke, how are we feeling today? I don't know how you're feeling, but I'm okay, I suppose. Just okay? Well, if I was feeling fantastic, I wouldn't be in here, would I? Have you been having the nightmares since we talked? Which ones? Have you seen the baby? I don't want to talk about that. I've told you that before. The night you were admitted here, The reports say that you are terribly agitated about a baby. But in our last session, you agreed that the woman in the woods is in your imagination. You know, Luke, sometimes when we talk about things we're scared of, it helps us to quantify them and see them for what they really are. What do you mean? Well, I'm particularly interested in the baby you talked about that night, and I'm wondering what it might symbolize in your life. Well, you're the psychiatrist, you tell me. Okay, I'll try, but you'll need to help me. When did you first see the baby? I sighed deeply. I don't know. Well, was it when you were a child or later, after you became famous? Yes, after. And how did it first appear? I was in Berlin, I think, or Dusseldorf. I know it was Germany. And when was this? 1992, 5 years ago, springtime. Yes, I was in bed. Alone? Yes, no, there had been a girl, but she'd left by then. And had you taken any substances? Not much. I had to be up early for breakfast TV. We'd gone back to the room after the gig, got some room service, a couple of bottles of beer. We did a few lines of coke each. That's all. Did you know the girl? Did you have sex with her? He coughed. I don't need the details. I looked at him, weighing up whether he was some kind of pervert. I'd seen a lot of shrinks, and you'd be surprised how many of them try to make everything about sex. Yes, I think her name was Hilda, or Gilda. She'd done my makeup earlier that day at the stadium. Was she a friend? A girlfriend? I suppose, for that night anyway. And did you see her after that night? No. Were you still high when you saw the baby? From the cocaine? No, the buzz had gone, but I was still awake. That's one of the side effects, you know. I saw judgment in his face. I know it sounds careless to take a drug like that when I had an early call next day, but I was used to it by then. I'd often taken way more than that on the night out without bloody hallucinations. Look, I'm your psychiatrist, and it would be irresponsible of me not to remind you how these substances might have a negative effect, particularly for someone with your sensitivities. You mean someone as mental as me? That's not the term I'd use, but let's get back to this hotel room. It was late, you were alone. What happened? I shoved my hands under my armpits, feeling suddenly cold. Luke? I shifted uncomfortably in the chair. I wished I was reclining on the sofa because then I wouldn't be looking at him. I looked down at my hand and there was a baby curled up in it, tiny. It fitted into my palm, wriggling around, crawling up my fingers. A human baby. It couldn't have been a mouse, for instance? I stared at him. No, it wasn't a mouse. It was a baby person. It had arms and legs and its mouth was screaming. In pain? Could you hear the screaming? I thought about it. No, I couldn't hear it, but I could see it, and yes, it was in pain. I was wide awake. I wasn't asleep. I definitely wasn't asleep. Okay, now you know, Luke, don't you, that it's not possible for human babies to be so small. What I know is that you don't believe me. What I know is that what I saw was not possible. What I know is that I saw it, and I still see it regularly. I believe that you believe you see it, Luke. How did you feel about it that first time? Nervous, protective. How do you think it got there? I winced because the next part of the story made me sound even more deranged. The old woman put it there. The woman from your nightmares, yes? How do you know she put it there? Did you see her? The old woman was sitting in the corner of the room. She told me to open my hand, and then she disappeared. I never saw her again. And she told me she was going to give me a gift a few nights earlier. In your dreams? Yes. Okay, let's concentrate on the baby. You said you felt protective of it. Did you feel like it was your baby? I don't know, but I didn't want it to get hurt. Who would hurt it? Me. That's it.
Brilliant, thank you so much for that. We have one question for you from Alex Hawley, Liz. Your stories seem to have long arcs. What is the advantage over shorter story arcs?
Long arcs, yeah, I do tend to, in most of my books, I tend to cover the lifetimes of the primary characters, because I like to see cause and effect. So I like to see how the characters' childhoods and how they are treated in childhood affects their later lives. I'm very interested in the nature versus nurture question. So I guess I never come down on the side to say which it is. I leave that to the reader to work out for themselves, because I guess I don't like to spoon feed the reader too much. I mean, they have to decide for themselves whether this character, Luke, whether he was product of his childhood, this, you know, psychopathy that he has, or whether he would have been this way anyway. Yeah. So that's my answer to that. I look at the whole picture of the character from beginning to end.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, and thanks for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Everybody, that's it. We've had 11 readers tonight. Wow. We will be putting up our quote of the week poll shortly, so please do check that out and vote. That will close this time tomorrow. Thank you, as always, to all of you for joining us. We've had record numbers of attendees tonight, so thank you very much for that. Thank you massively to all of the readers who've joined us tonight, and to the fun-loving criminals and Jason Isaacs for providing us with some mega groovy music. Thank you to everyone who's contributed to Noir from the Bar, available on Amazon and at Forum Books in Corbridge now. If you've enjoyed it, please leave a review. If you haven't, just forget you ever read it. Thank you, as always, to our lovely Simon Buick, who got really excited to see Lauren's blog this evening, but for doing such a phenomenal job with the tech, with the breaks, with just everything, because he's amazing. Thank you again for being here, and keep your eyes peeled as to who will be gracing us with their